step away from the car. Now.
I just parked it.
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm questioning.
Questioning what? Me or the car? Say it clearly.
Watch your tone. Don't push this.
No, you already did.
The Whitmore Grand Hotel, Savannah, Georgia, a Thursday evening in October, the kind of evening that Savannah does particularly well. Warm air off the river, the light going amber through the Spanish moss, the sound of a jazz quartet drifting from the terrace bar 2 floors up. Valet attendants moving in their practiced way through the motor court. Guests arriving in everything from rental sedans to vehicles that cost more than most people's mortgages. At 6:22 p.m., a black Ferrari Roma pulled into the motor court and stopped at the valet stand. The woman who got out was dressed simply, dark slacks, a structured jacket, heels that didn't suggest she'd been traveling. She handed the key to the valet attendant, a young man named Marcus who had been working this stand for 2 years and had seen every kind of car and every kind of person and had learned quickly to read neither as a predictor of the other. She had a small bag over one shoulder. She walked toward the hotel entrance without looking back at the car. She'd made it 6 steps. Officer Kyle Donnelly of the Savannah PD had been running patrol on the waterfront district for 4 years. He was 32. He'd been driving past the Whitmore's motor court when the Ferrari pulled in. He'd slowed down. He'd watched the woman get out. He'd watched her hand the key to Marcus, and then he'd pulled his cruiser into the motor court behind the Ferrari and gotten out. In the federal civil complaint filed 8 months later, the opening paragraph would describe what happened next as a textbook example of bias-driven enforcement in which the officer's own documented communications confirmed that his decision to initiate the stop was based not on any reported incident or observable violation, but on his assessment of the driver's appearance relative to the vehicle she was driving. But that's the language of a legal document. What actually happened was simpler and uglier and caught on 4 cameras and a valet stand recording system and the phones of 7 guests who happened to be standing in the motor court when a woman with a key in her hand was told that the car the key had just unlocked might not be hers. The woman was Vanessa Rowland, 44 years old, undercover special agent, FBI, Eastern Georgia Field Division. She'd been running an operation out of Savannah for 3 weeks. She was at the Whitmore because the operation required her to be. The hotel was part of her cover. The Ferrari was a federally leased vehicle assigned to the operation. And the Thursday evening was the first window she'd had in 11 days where she wasn't actively in the field. She had been planning to have dinner, take a bath, and sleep for 8 hours. She was not going to get any of that until considerably later than planned. The Hargrove account, Vanessa said. She was still facing the hotel entrance. She turned around slowly. Can you explain what that is? A guest at this hotel reported a vehicle matching this description as potentially taken without permission from their account. Their account. Their valet account. The vehicle was supposed to be held. This vehicle was not in any valet account. I drove it here 20 seconds ago. Marcus took the key from my hand. She looked at Marcus, who was standing very still with the key in his hand and the expression of a man who understood exactly what was happening and was doing the math on what involvement cost him. Marcus, did I hand you the key to this vehicle? Yes, ma'am, Marcus said. Donnelly looked at Marcus. Not a threatening look. The look that communicates that a witness's relevance has been noted and set aside. He looked back at Vanessa. I still need to verify the vehicle before we go any further. Verify it how? Run the plates. Check the registration against the report. Run the plates, that's fine. Yet run them right now. Step away from the vehicle while I do. I'm 6 feet from the vehicle. I'm not touching it. Step away. Vanessa looked at him. She took 3 steps to the left. How's that? Donnelly walked to his cruiser. He ran the plates. The result came back in 50 seconds. Federally registered, no flags, no holds, no reported theft. He looked at the readout, sat in his cruiser for a moment, got out. Registration shows a federal lease, he said. Yes. Federal agencies don't typically station vehicles at luxury hotels. They do when the operation requires it. What operation? I'm not going to discuss an active operation on a hotel motor court. Donnelly stepped closer. I need you to be more specific about your connection to this vehicle. I told you, it's mine. The registration confirmed it's federally registered. What else do you need? I need to understand what a federal vehicle is doing here and who authorized it. My agency authorized it. I'm the agent assigned to it. You're a federal agent. Yes. The way he said it, the particular flatness of someone demonstrating that they have heard a claim and decided not to believe it, was the moment the motor court shifted, not loudly. Just a slight adjustment in the attention of the people nearby. The couple who'd been waiting for their own car moved a half step closer. A man coming out of the hotel entrance held the door and didn't go in. A woman on the terrace above leaned over the railing. "I'm going to need to see credentials," Donnelly said. "My credentials are in my bag. I'm going to reach for them." "Hold on." He held up a hand. "What else is in the bag? Personal items?" "My credentials." "Any weapons?" "That's not a question I'm going to answer without knowing the legal basis for this stop." "I told you the legal basis. A reported vehicle. That came back clean when you ran it 30 seconds ago." Vanessa's voice was still level, still controlled. The specific flatness of a woman who has conducted interviews, managed informants, and sat across from people who had done genuinely terrible things, and who was not going to be rattled by a valet court. "The basis you arrive with has been resolved. Do you have a new one? Stay with this, because it gets considerably worse before it gets better." Donnelly's backup arrived at 6:31 p.m. Officer Zachary Pike, 2 years on the force. Now he pulled up to the motor court and got out with the specific posture of a junior officer arriving at a scene that has already been set for him. He read Donnelly's body language, read Vanessa's, and settled into a position slightly to her right without being asked to. The motor court had become a different place in 9 minutes. The couple waiting for their car had not left. They'd moved to the edge of the valet stand and were watching. The man at the hotel entrance had come back out entirely. 3 more guests had gathered on the terrace above. Marcus, the valet attendant, had found a reason to stay very close to the stand rather than moving the Ferrari to the lot, which meant the key was still in his hand and the car was still right there, in the motor court, registered clean, and belonging to the woman standing 6 feet from it, being asked to justify her connection to it. "I'm going to ask you one more time," Donnelly said. "What is your name and what is your federal affiliation?" "I've told you my affiliation. I've offered to show you credentials. You told me to hold on. I'm asking again. My name is Vanessa Rowland. My federal affiliation is the FBI. My credentials are in this bag. Would you like to see them now? I'd like you to step over here first." He indicated the space beside his cruiser, away from the hotel entrance, away from the gathering witnesses, away from Marcus and the key in the car. "I'm not going to step away from the public space. Whatever you need to ask me, you can ask me here." That wasn't a request. Then state it as a command and explain the legal basis for it. Donnelly looked at her for a long moment. The look of a man whose strategy has not produced the outcome he expected, and who is deciding whether to change the strategy or intensify it. He intensified it. "You're being evasive," he said, louder now. "Public address volume, the volume of someone who has decided that audience matters. You've refused to identify yourself, refused to comply with a lawful directive, and you're standing in this motor court next to a vehicle that was called in as potentially misappropriated. The vehicle came back clean. And I am giving you one final opportunity to cooperate before this escalates." "I've been cooperating since you pulled in. I stepped away from the car. I waited while you ran the plates. I offered credentials twice. I answered every question you asked. What specific action am I refusing to take? Step to my vehicle? Legal basis. Investigative detention? Based on what? The plates are clean. I've identified myself. What is the investigation?" Donnelly stepped forward. "Turn around." The motor court went very still. "Don't," Vanessa said. One word, not loud. The register of a woman setting a boundary that she intends to hold. "I am a federal officer. You do not have probable cause to detain me. If you place your hands on me, you will be doing so on camera in front of 12 witnesses, and I want you to understand exactly what that means before you decide." Donnelly reached for her arm. She didn't pull away. She let his hand close on her arm. Because pulling away changes the footage, and she had been building this footage for 9 minutes, and she was not going to give anyone a reason to describe her behavior as the problem. She stood still, his hand on her arm, her hands visible. 12 witnesses, 4 cameras, Marcus still holding the key. "You're being detained," Donnelly said. "On what charge?" "Obstruction." "I haven't obstructed anything. You've obstructed a guest from entering a hotel where she has a reservation, based on a report that your own plates check cleared 9 minutes ago." Pike was watching from his position to her right. His hand was near his belt, but not on it. His face had the expression of a man who had arrived at a scene expecting one thing and gotten something that his training hadn't fully prepared him for, specifically a subject who was more procedurally fluent than the officer detaining her. He looked at Donnelly's hand on her arm, looked at the crowd, looked at the Ferrari with the clean registration, looked at the woman who had offered credentials twice and been told to wait. He said nothing. That silence would be in his personnel file within 2 weeks. "I'd like to call my supervisor," Vanessa said. "You can make calls at the station." "I'd like to make one now." "That's not happening." "Then I'd like you to hear something first." Her voice was still level, still the same temperature it had been when she said, "I'm sure about that 9 minutes ago," in response to a question she should never have been asked. "In my bag, behind my credentials, there is a laminated card with a number on it. That number connects to the FBI's Field Operations Duty Line. If you call it and give them my name, they will confirm my identity, my assignment, and the federal registration on this vehicle in under 90 seconds. I am asking you to do that before you put me in your car." "We verify at the station. You verified the plates here. You can verify the agent here. It's the same process." "Turn around." The woman on the terrace above said something to the person next to her. Audible. Not printable, but audible on the terrace recording that was later submitted as Exhibit G. The man who had come back out of the hotel entrance was on his phone. The couple at the valet stand had been joined by 2 more guests. Marcus was still holding the key and had not taken a step in any direction. Donnelly reached for his cuffs. Watch what happens when he realizes who she is. The call came at 6:44 p.m. Not from Vanessa. Her phone was in her bag, which Donnelly had placed on the hood of his cruiser after telling her not to reach for it. The call came to Donnelly's own radio from dispatch, unprompted, because Pike, in the 30 seconds while Donnelly was reaching for his cuffs, had quietly called it in. The plate, the federal registration, the agent's stated name, and dispatch had run it, and what came back had prompted the duty supervisor to call forward immediately. Dispatch, Unit 14. We have a federal confirmation on your current detainee. Supervisory Special Agent Vanessa Rowland, FBI Eastern Georgia Division. She is confirmed active assignment in your location. Sergeant Merritt is en route. Do not proceed with transport. The motor court heard it. All of it. The speaker on Donnelly's radio was not turned down. It had been on full volume the entire time because he'd been using it to call in the original stop. He stood with the cuffs in one hand and the radio crackling in the other, and the confirmation of everything Vanessa had told him coming through the speaker in front of 12 witnesses, 4 cameras, and Marcus the valet attendant who was still holding the key. Vanessa looked at him. She said nothing. She didn't need to. The 4 seconds that followed were the 4 seconds that would be paused in every review of this footage, replayed in the civil complaint, described in the settlement negotiations, and used in the revised training materials the department adopted 6 months later. Donnelly standing in a hotel motor court in Savannah, Georgia, with handcuffs in his hand, a dispatch confirmation in his ear, and a federal agent in front of him who had told him exactly who she was 9 times in 22 minutes. He put the cuffs back on his belt. "I'm going to need my bag," Vanessa said. He picked it up off the hood and handed it to her. She took it, opened the front pocket, removed her credentials, held them up, not to Donnelly, to the motor court, to the 12 witnesses, to the 4 cameras, to Marcus, now who was still holding the key, and whose expression had, over the past 22 minutes, traveled from careful neutrality through visible discomfort and arrived somewhere that looked a lot like relief. She clipped the credentials to her jacket. She looked at Donnelly. "When Sergeant Merritt arrives, I'd like to give a full statement on scene. I'd like both body cam feeds secured before anyone leaves this motor court, and I'd like the valet stand recording system preserved. Marcus, does the stand have a camera?" "Yes, ma'am," Marcus said. Immediately. "Thank you." She looked back at Donnelly. "I'm going to wait by the entrance." She walked to the hotel entrance. The man who had been holding the door stepped aside. She went in. She went directly to the front desk. Aud explained that she would need her check-in delayed by approximately 30 minutes and asked for a glass of water. The woman at the front desk gave her the water and didn't ask any questions because she had been watching from the lobby window for the last 15 minutes and understood that the woman in front of her had just been through something that warranted water without questions. Sergeant Dana Whitfield arrived at 6:51 p.m. She pulled into the motor court, assessed the scene in the time it took her to cross from her cruiser to the valet stand, and went directly to Donnelly. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't perform for the crowd. She did what good supervisors do in situations like this. She got the facts in the right order before she said anything that would become part of the record. She asked Donnelly to walk her through the stop. He did. She let him finish. Then she looked at Pike. "You called it in?" "Yes, Sergeant." "After the detention was initiated?" "Yes, Sergeant." She looked at the motor court, the crowd that hadn't left, the Ferrari still at the valet stand. Marcus, still holding the key with the specific patience of a man who had decided that his job tonight was to hold the key and be a witness and do both things exactly right. She went inside. She found Vanessa at a chair near the lobby window, sat down across from her. "Sergeant Dana Whitfield, I owe you an apology that I don't have adequate language for right now." "I know," Vanessa said, not unkindly. "I'd like to give a full statement. I'd like both body cam feeds, the valet stand recording, and the dispatch log from 6:22 p.m. forward. And I'd like the name and contact information of the person who made the original report about the Hargrove account." Whitfield looked at her notepad. "The original call? I ran it on the way here. There is no Hargrove account at this hotel. The front desk has no record of any report about a vehicle being held or misappropriated this evening." Vanessa set down her water glass. She picked it back up. "Okay," she said, quiet, the word doing a lot of work in a very small space. "Okay," Whitfield said. They understood each other. The Internal Affairs Review opened the following morning. The body cam footage from both Donnelly and Pike was secured that night, along with the valet stand recording, the hotel terrace camera feed, and the cell phone footage from 4 of the 12 witnesses who submitted it voluntarily. The dispatch log was pulled. The original stop call was reviewed. What the review found in the first 48 hours established the shape of everything that followed. Donnelly's body-worn camera had been active from the moment he exited his cruiser. The footage showed a clean plates return at 6:24 p.m., 9 minutes before the detention. It showed Vanessa offering credentials twice and being told to wait. It showed the arm grab at 6:43 p.m. It showed the dispatch confirmation playing on full volume in the motor court at 6:44 p.m. while Donnelly held cuffs in his hand. It showed the 4-second pause. It showed him putting the cuffs back. The review board spent significant time on that 9-minute window, the gap between the clean plates return and the detention. 9 minutes in which Donnelly had continued a stop that his own equipment had cleared. The board's analysis of those 9 minutes ran to 6 pages. The conclusion took 1 sentence. His prior complaint history added layers that made the 6 pages denser. 2 prior complaints. First, a black man stopped outside a jewelry store in the waterfront district, asked to verify his purchase while his bag from the store was in his hands. Complaint filed and closed in 36 hours. Second, a black woman stopped in a parking garage in the historic district, questioned about her vehicle, complaint filed by her attorney, assigned to internal review, sitting unreviewed for 14 months. 14 months. In the active queue, with a file number. Unread. The review board pulled the file. Read it. The officer who had been assigned to review it was not Donnelly's supervisor. It was a lieutenant in the administrative division who had been assigned to the review queue and had not cleared it. His file went into the report by name. The report described the 14-month delay as an institutional failure that represents a pattern of non-engagement with civilian complaints that enabled documented behavioral patterns to continue without correction. That sentence, institutional failure, meant the lieutenant was in the report. It meant the department's complaint processing system was in the report. It meant the question of who built the environment that produced a 9-minute gap between a clean plates return and a detention was being asked by name and answered by evidence. Donnelly was suspended without pay on day 4. The suspension letter cited 4 specific failures: initiating a stop without documented cause, continuing the stop after exculpatory evidence was obtained, making physical contact without probable cause, and proceeding toward detention after dispatch confirmation of federal identity. 4 failures, all on camera, all time-stamped. His union filed a grievance on day 6. The grievance panel watched the footage. They watched the 9-minute gap. They watched the cuffs come out after the dispatch confirmation. They watched the 4-second pause. The grievance was denied on day 23. His termination recommendation was filed by the review board on day 19. The division chief approved it on day 22. His law enforcement certification was referred to the Georgia Post Council on day 25. Thence the council reviewed the case on day 37. Certification revoked on day 44. He filed an appeal. The appeal panel watched the footage. Specifically, they watched the moment at 6:44 p.m. when the dispatch confirmation came through the speaker on full volume in front of 12 witnesses, and Donnelly still had cuffs in his hand. The appeal was denied on day 61. Pike received a formal reprimand for failure to intervene. His attorney argued that he had been the one to call in the federal confirmation, which had stopped the detention. The review board acknowledged that and noted the timestamp showed the call was made after the arm grab, not before, and that Pike had been present during the 9-minute gap and had not acted. The reprimand was upheld. Like the Hargrove account, which did not exist, was investigated by the city prosecutor's office. The original caller was identified through the hotel's front desk, which had received a brief call at 6:19 p.m. from a guest who had described a vehicle in the motor court as suspicious. The caller was a 61-year-old man staying in a third-floor suite. He had seen the Ferrari arrive. He had seen the woman get out. He had called the front desk, not 911, but the front desk attendant on duty had relayed it to the valet supervisor, who had mentioned it in passing to a patrol officer walking through the lobby. That patrol officer was Donnelly, who had been inside the hotel using the restroom, and had come out to the motor court based on the second-hand relay of a guest's comment about a car that seemed out of place. No formal report had ever been made. The Hargrove account had never existed. Donnelly had told Vanessa a report had been filed about a specific account, which the front desk had no record of, which dispatch had no record of, and which the valet supervisor, interviewed on day 3, said he had never described in those terms. The city prosecutor reviewed the facts and determined that the original caller had not made a false report. He'd called the front desk, not the police. The disconnect between what the guest had said and what Donnelly had told Vanessa was not the guest's doing. That finding was in the civil complaint, in bold. The lawsuit was filed 41 days after the stop. It named Donnelly personally. It named the Savannah PD. It named the city. And it named the lieutenant whose queue had held the prior complaint unreviewed for 14 months. The filing cited 6 violations. 3 carried personal liability. 1 addressed the complaint review system's institutional failure directly. The 6th was a federal civil rights count that the city's legal team spent 4 weeks trying to separate from the municipal liability. They couldn't separate it. The civil rights count and the municipal liability shared the same evidence base. The 9-minute gap, the prior complaints, the 14-month unreviewed file, and a stop that began with a second-hand relay of a guest's comment about a car that seemed out of place. That was the whole of it. A car that seemed out of place. The settlement was reached at day 93. $12 million. Why? Mandatory independent review of all complaint closures in the prior 5 years. External oversight of the complaint processing queue for 5 years, with a mandate that no complaint sit unreviewed for more than 30 days. Mandatory bias recognition and de-escalation training for all officers in the Waterfront District. Reopening of both prior Donnelly complaints under independent review, and the elimination of the informal relay system between hotel front desks and patrol officers, which the settlement described as an unstructured channel for bias transmission that bypasses the documentation requirements of formal reporting. That last condition was the one Vanessa's attorneys had included in the first draft and every subsequent one. A check without that condition was a payment to continue. Yes, the city learned what that meant on day 93. Vanessa had dinner at the Whitmore on the Friday after the settlement closed. Not as a statement, not for any particular reason except that she'd been planning to have dinner there 8 months earlier and hadn't gotten to, and she had a window between operations and the restaurant was genuinely good. She ordered the snapper. She had a glass of wine. She sat at a window table and watched the motor court below and the street beyond it and the river visible between the buildings at the far end, the water moving in its slow way toward the coast. Marcus was still working the valet stand. He recognized her when she came in and gave her a nod that communicated about 4 different things at once. Yes, the way nods sometimes do when the people exchanging them have shared something that didn't need to be shared but was. She nodded back. She ate her snapper. She finished her wine. She sat at the table for a while after, watching the motor court, watching the cars come and go, the attendants moving in their practiced way through the evening. She thought about the prior complaint that had sat in a queue for 14 months. The black woman in the parking garage in the historic district who had filed it and followed the correct process and been assigned a file number and heard nothing for 14 months. She'd been notified during the settlement process that her case had been reopened. She'd received a letter. She'd given a statement. She'd been told the review would conclude within 60 days. Vanessa didn't know her name, and the process was confidential. She knew only that a woman had filed a complaint, gotten a number, and heard nothing for over a year, and that the Ferrari in the motor court and the 9 minutes on the body cam footage and the $12 million had, in a roundabout and deeply inadequate way, finally gotten someone to read her file. The motor court below was quiet now. The last valets were bringing the final few cars down from the lot. The jazz from the terrace bar had stopped. The evening was doing what Savannah evenings do, going warm and slow and Spanish moss quiet. She paid her bill, she stood up. She walked out through the lobby and through the entrance and into the motor court and stood there for a moment in the place where it had happened, in the evening air with the river smell coming off the water 3 blocks away. Tish, she thought about what the woman in the parking garage had filed, what she'd described, what she'd been told when she followed up, which was that the matter was under review, what she'd found when she followed up a second time, 6 months later, which was nothing, which was her file sitting in a queue with a number on it and a lieutenant who had not read it. She thought about how close those two experiences were. A federal agent with a Ferrari and credentials and a dispatch line and $12 million of institutional consequence. A woman in a parking garage with a complaint form and a file number and 14 months of silence. The car that seemed out of place was the whole difference. The car was the reason the crowd gathered. The car was the reason the cameras were close enough. The car was the reason the story traveled. It is the woman in the parking garage had driven something ordinary. And ordinary cars don't gather crowds. And when crowds don't gather, cameras don't come out. And when cameras don't come out, files sit in queues. Vanessa walked to the street, flagged a cab, got in. She had an early morning. If you believe this should never happen to anyone in any car, with any credentials or without them, subscribe, because the ones that don't travel are the ones that matter most.